I answer the question, why am I a black Zionist? This should be a contradiction to many people of the Marxist temperament, but for me, it's not at all, because I know the reality on the ground. Many people that say that this is a contradiction, many people that are passionate about this particular topic have never been to or lived in Israel, have no idea, generally what they're talking about. And that's just the reality. I have a unique perspective of living there when I was a kid, growing up there till I was 7, and then recently now I've been living there for over a year. So this is a different topic now. Some might say, okay, you're Christian, what makes you want to be that? The reality is, my whole mother's side of the family, they're Jewish. My dad's side is Christian. I grew up with both perspectives in the Jewish homeland. So what does that mean? That means, I knew that there was coexistence was possible even at home, and there was no, bad blood. My mother, she's Jewish, but, there's a cultural aspect and then there's a religious aspect. She's a follower of Jesus as well. She's a, believer as well. So this is, gets a little bit more complicated, but the reality is Israel deserves to exist because, one, it does. So whether, people like it or not, there's no country's gonna give itself up other than war. So that reality is not gonna happen. Now, why I support it, even beyond just its existence, this is like the easy, the obvious, the logical, based off experience and based off of, just understanding reality of war. Like, no country's gonna give itself up just blindly, So that being said, because I know how that demographic of people are treated without, their homeland. I know how Jews are treated when they don't have their own homeland. I study the history. I know the realities of what it's like. And even though I'm particularly not religiously Jewish, doesn't mean I don't feel as though Israelis, the Jewish people, should not receive their own homeland, should not have their own homeland. Because, for one, my family that's there, that is Jewish, and my whole mother's side of the family is Jewish and a little bit religiously pretty Jewish. I'd say most of them are religiously Jewish, just not like, study the Talmud every day type of religiously Jewish. But they are, dang, where the hell am I? I hate being in public. Dang, this is cool. That's crazy. Look at this. Look at that. That's pretty cool. Dang, my arm's getting tired. I want these videos to be longer, but my arm gets tired. So yeah. What was I saying? Yeah, so now people say, okay, you're black. Why should you be a Zionist? Why should you support the Jewish people in their homeland? First of all, that is their homeland. It's no longer a debate. It's not a debate at all. The Jewish people, the word Jew came from Judea, and it is not only written in the history books, it's not only, in the fossils and the artifacts that are discovered in Israel, but it's also in their name. So, I mean, I feel like I'm like playing into the hands of like idiots, Palestinians, Muslims that hate on Israel when I like try to justify the Jewish people in Israel. Like, I really don't care if you're not convinced, if you don't believe objective facts, if you don't think that Israel deserves to be there. It doesn't bother me at all. The reality is, nobody wanted Jews there from the beginning, so it's not a logical issue. It's a religious issue. So the reality is, what does that mean, right? For me, being black in a non-African country is, I kind of got to the A/B test, I would say. The A/B test in the sense of, I've lived in America and then I've lived in Israel, obviously in different age brackets, in different, times of age, and also times of age of the country. I mean, in the 90s, I would say Israel was still a young country, you know. I would say it was pretty, you know, it's like, I guess 50 years isn't like super young, but it's young in the grand scheme of the modern day version of it. So, I mean, if you compare that to the West, if you compare that to, you know, where I'm now, Italy, and I mean, the Venetian Empire that predates Italy, the Venetian Republic, it's relatively young from modern standards, but obviously has the historical aspect to it, like many other countries, like many other republics. But I would say it's difficult to A/B test, but I think I can. Now that I've lived there as an adult, I've lived in Israel as an adult, I would say the biggest distinction is that Israelis are actually black Israelis and quote-unquote white Israelis. There isn't really like the minority or the quote-unquote white Israelis, which is like the European Jews, even though the first settlers were European Jews, and then obviously they combined with the Jews that were already living in Israel at that particular time, which there was a lot. I would say the biggest distinction, I would say, of how black people are treated in Israel and black people are treated in America is that the black people in Israel actually, even though there's like a pretty small percentage relative to the black people in America, the Ethiopians, the black people in Israel, which is mainly Ethiopian Jews, which is where I come from, they live amongst and inside and within the quote-unquote white or European or Sephardic or Middle Eastern Jews, whatever you want to call them. There's many different types of Jews. I'm just giving you like the bigger population percentage, the Sephardic, Ashkenazi, Ethiopian Jews, but there's many others, and they live amongst each other. So it's not like America where you have like this ghetto and then like you have like where there's like literally no white people. Like I know people that grew up in Compton, South Central, that like have literally never been around white people or non-black or non-Mexican people, which sounds crazy, but I mean that's just kind of America's demographic breakdown. I would say in Israel, because it was like it was kind of a communist, like socialist country for a very long time. It's very like, I don't want to say equal because that makes socialism and communism sound good, which it's not. It's evil and it never works. But at least everyone was equally, I guess, poor or equally just working daily jobs. It wasn't like this, you know, this generational wealth that could be, you know, distributed and passed on over and over. And, you know, a lot of people, I don't believe in like reparations, but obviously there was definitely a benefit of having free labor for generations. You keep that wealth within the families. So, you know, there just isn't really that aspect in Israel. So it's relatively equal. I always joke and I say like everyone is like equally poor. Like most people in America, like, you know, Jewish people are very studious in America. They're very like hardworking, and that's the case in Israel as well. But I would say like a lot of Jewish people are very wealthy and are very wealthy in America, right? Which is great. And there we have, you know, there's wealthy Jews in Israel as well, of course. However, in Israel, there's like most people work everyday jobs. So like you're never really around rich Jewish people. You will never see them. I only see poor, like lower middle class Jewish people. So this whole like, so it's actually like hilarious when I hear like Jews run this, Jews are rich, Jews, you know, there's like a cabal of, it's like hilarious because all the Jewish white people, all the Jewish Middle Eastern people, all the Jewish, you know, Sephardic, whatever, all of them that I know, the dozens, are pretty broke. And I don't mean that in a derogatory term because, you know, it's not really the focus of the culture in the Middle East and in Israel. It's more about like family, you know, community, which, you know, there's plus and minuses of that. and you know, the taxes are what they are in Israel, and you can't get around that, and it hurts the economy, and things were worse. Like, the tax situation was worse back in the day in Israel, but things have actually opened up more, but taxes are still kind of crazy in Israel because there's a lot of like welfare and, you know, expenditures of the government with military and all that, even with the supposed so much money America gives Israel, which it does, but it gives other countries a lot of money as well. But that being said, it's just a very unique and hard place to describe. Like, for example, look at Venice. Look what I'm here. I mean, I can try to show you a video of Venice and, you know, do a walking vlog and, like, you know, do this whole place up and down. But the issue is, you don't really understand it until you're there. Most people have never been around Israelis. Most people will never meet Israelis in their life. Most people will never go to Israel. But for some reason, they have this like dramatic opinion on it. They have this perspective on it that is like not grounded in reality. And that is a reality that I know very well. So it's like, it's comical to hear people speak about something with such confidence and have never been to it and have never met anybody that has lived there, and they're like, you have some people try to lecture me about it, and I'm just like, you're insane, you have no idea. If you actually knew the reality, you would think the opposite, which is usually the case. If you haven't noticed, people that live in Israel, people that have been to Israel generally support it, because the propaganda, the delta between the propaganda and the actual reality on the ground is so dramatic that it's like, it's overwhelming. You feel shame when you go there. You're like, oh dang, this isn't what I thought. Actually, it's like, it's actually way better in a good way than what I thought. Look at all these boats. So yeah, so I don't know, that's all I wanted to say. The reality is not, you know, black people are treated so well in Israel, and in America they're treated so bad. It's like, no, I think racism's like pretty much gone in America, other than like the black on white racism that we have now, which is like trying to overcorrect the previous version of racism, which I just have always thought is racist. I don't care if it's like quote unquote punching down or punching up. Racism is racism, and I wasn't raised to be racist. So the version, the Israeli version of you know, racism is racism where there isn't really a ton of racism. I mean, everybody's kind of on the same, in the same boat. Everyone's kind of on the same page. And if someone's an asshole to you, it's generally not because you're black. It's generally because Israel people are just assholes, and they're not assholes because they're mean. They're not assholes because they hate you. They're assholes because that's just the culture, the Middle Eastern culture, whether you're in Lebanon, whether you're in Iraq, you know, the Middle East, there's a certain level of toughness you need in order to be able to survive there. There's a certain level, there's a certain way you need to communicate. Also, Israel's a small country. People are just more aggressive. People are more, you know, forthright in speaking, you know, matter of fact, especially pretty much everybody's multiple generation ex-military. You know, a large portion of them have seen some sort of action, you know, on the ground. So that makes you not super sensitive to words. You know, it makes you a little bit more rough around the edges. You know, so that's just something to consider. So, and this is actually a really important point, because growing up, you know, if someone's an asshole to you, is it because you're Asian? Is it because you're black? Is it because you're poor? Is it you know, if a girl rejects you, is that because you're short? Unless they say so, then you're just pontificating. Then you're just, you know, maybe it's like confirmation bias, right? You have a certain perspective and you want that affirmed. Unless someone is explicitly being disrespectful, hateful, doesn't give me the job because of, you know, the color of my skin, then I can conclude that it is racism. But the reality is, bro, most of the time at this stage, if someone's an asshole, they're an asshole to you because they're just an asshole. Like, most people, most nice people are not racist. Like, most of the time the racists are just assholes. They might beat their wife, they might be assholes to just anybody, and like, they just see that as like your one vulnerability, that you're, you know, black, that you're Asian, that you're short, whatever, right? So that's something to keep in mind. So that being said, the conclusion is, being black I would say being black in Israel it's way more equal, I would say, but there's no racism in America either, I would say. There's no racism in it, and I mean, there's certain parts, of course, but people are just assholes. People are just looking for an enemy, and you know, they might see black people as that enemy, but the reality is it's not as exciting. The reality is not that exciting. Most people in Israel are people just like you and I, Americans in the West, and they're just living their lives. They, you know, in Israel, they have a high fertility rate. I think it's around 3 actually. Like it's like, I think like 2.8, which is like way up above the national average. And there's an incentive to do that. They, you know, they want to grow the Israeli population. But in America, it's like we're like below the replacement rate at this point. So that being said, you know, when people have kids, they're busy. They don't have time to be racist. They don't have time to cause trouble. They don't have time to commit crime. They're working. And that's how Israelis are. They've ignored all this BS about, you know, being racist, about this and that, and they're focused on just their families, which is kind of boring to people, and people want to get in like these arguments with people, but the reality is way less exciting. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. This is coming from my personal experience. You know, I've been to Israel. I lived in Israel, I live in Israel, I've lived in America, so this isn't like some like hypothetical for me. I've met a lot of people, I'm very social, I like talking to people, I'm very honest, so yeah, let me know guys, peace.